50 years ago today, the Beatles made their U.S. debut on The Ed Sullivan Show. Millions of Americans were glued to their television screens. A New Mexico Hall of Fame radio broadcaster watched the program, but never imagined 6 months later he'd joined the Fab Four on their first North American tour. News 13's Kayla Mares has his story.
It was 1964. Beatlemania gripped the U.S. 6 months after their first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, the Beatles took their act on the road. Albuquerque resident Art Schreiber, who became legally blind in the 1980s, was one of 5 reporters along for the ride.
If my son were here with this interview, he would tell you that the last person in the world who should have ever been assigned to the Beatles tour was his father.
Schreiber was working at a radio station in Cleveland. He spent much of the 1960s reporting on the civil rights movement. Schreiber was scheduled to cover the Democratic National Convention when he pitched another idea to his bosses.
But I said, put me on the Beatles tour, and that's how it all started.
For 3 weeks of the Beatles' North American tour, Schreiber filed 15 reports a day and tried to dodge fans who wanted to get closer to John, Ringo, Paul, and George.
3 suits. You just got shredded. With long fingernails. A jacket didn't last very long.
While fans were clamoring for the Beatles, John Lennon would call Schreiber at night for a game of Monopoly and to talk about American culture and politics.
I played Monopoly with John and George night after night after night.
Schreiber didn't take any photos with the Beatles, but he didn't leave empty-handed. A signed picture hangs on his wall, encouraging him to keep playing Monopoly. While Schreiber can't see it anymore, the memories are still vivid. Back then, he knew the Beatles were something else. But never could he have imagined the influence they'd have 50 years later.
Their music has stayed and will stay. They're icons. It's incredible.
Kayla Ayers, KRQE News 13.
The tapes of Schreiber's interviews with the Beatles were stolen shortly after he returned from the tour. Schreiber moved to New Mexico in the 1980s to work in broadcasting. Now retired, he is very involved in the state's Commission of the Blind as well as the National Federation of the Blind.